Something that I never really dreamed would happen to me, and you know, I was very involved with the film.
We grew up watching Disney shows and movies together, so that was his way of kind of being able to do it for his kids.
The world thought they understood Phil Collins. He was the voice that dominated radio for 2 decades. The drummer who stepped out from behind the kit and became a superstar, the man who turned Heartbreak into platinum records, who sold over 100 million albums, and who seemed untouchable on stage. But in truth, Phil Collins carried a secret that was heavier than any hit he ever recorded. At just 47 years old, when his fame should have been enough to shield him from pain, Collins confessed something that stunned his fans. It wasn't about In the Air Tonight, the dark anthem born from divorce.
And I can feel it coming in the air tonight.
It wasn't about Against All Odds, the power ballad that turned heartbreak into triumph.
And you coming back to me, it's against the odds.
No, it was about a quieter song, one that most people dismissed as just another soundtrack tune. Yet for Collins, that song was a dagger straight to his heart, because it wasn't written for stadiums. It wasn't written for the charts. It was written for a little girl who would grow up knowing him, not just as a rock star, but as the father who was often gone. His daughter. And every time he sang it, every time he heard it, Collins admitted that it made him cry. But why? Why would one of the strongest voices in rock break down over a Disney song? And what did that song reveal about the private man hiding behind the legend? That's the story you've never been told. This is RetroWaves, the place where music's biggest legends finally reveal their hidden truths. We don't just replay the hits, we tell you the real stories behind them. The stories that were too painful, too personal, or too complicated to make the headlines. If you've ever wondered what really went on behind the studio doors, if you've ever asked yourself what the stars were really thinking when they stepped off stage, then you're in the right place. Hit subscribe, give this video a like, and join us as we uncover the secrets that shape the soundtrack of your life. Because in this story, Phil Collins' confession will change the way you hear one of his most beloved songs forever. By the mid-1990s, Phil Collins had achieved what most musicians could only dream of. He had left Genesis, one of the most influential rock bands in history, and proved that he could stand on his own. His solo career exploded with hits like One More Night, Take Me Home, and Another Day in Paradise.
It's just another day for you and me in paradise.
He wasn't just a rock star, he was a global icon. Yet while the crowd screamed his name, Collins's personal life told a different story. By the time he was 47, he had already endured 2 divorces. His first marriage to Andrea Bertorelli had ended bitterly, with the tabloids splashing details of his heartbreak. His second marriage, to Jill Tevelman, collapsed in equally painful fashion. Both breakups left scars, not just on him, but on his children. Simon and Jolie from his first marriage, and Lily from his second, often grew up with their father far away, busy touring, recording, or working on film scores. Collins later admitted that this was the wound that never healed. He loved his children deeply, but he wasn't always there. Fame demanded sacrifices, and the price was measured in missed birthdays, school events, and stolen moments he could never get back. The press often painted him as cold, even selfish, the man who cared more about music than about family. And while Collins pushed back against that image, he didn't deny the guilt that came with it. In interviews years later, he confessed that he had been consumed by work, that his drive for success had taken him away from the people who needed him most. It was during this time that Disney approached him for a new project, a film called Tarzan. The studio wanted Collins not only to write songs, but also to perform them in multiple languages for a worldwide audience. For many artists, it would have been just another assignment, but for Collins, it struck a nerve. Because at the heart of Tarzan was a story about family, loss, and belonging. Themes that echoed uncomfortably close to his own life. When he sat down at the piano to compose, he found himself thinking less about the film and more about his daughter Lily. Out of that reflection came "You'll Be in My Heart," a lullaby, a promise, and a confession disguised as a song. At first, it seemed like just another movie tune. Sweet, simple, destined for radio play. But for Collins, it was something much deeper. Years later, he would admit that every time he performed it, he couldn't hold back his tears, because it wasn't written for Disney executives. It wasn't written for chart success. It was written for his little girl, the one who reminded him of everything he had lost, and everything he still hoped to give. But why did this particular song cut him so deeply? And how did the world react when Collins finally revealed the truth behind it? That's where the story takes a turn. Phil Collins once said that music was both his blessing and his curse. The blessing was obvious. Millions of records sold, Grammy Awards, an Oscar, and sold-out tours around the globe. But the curse came in the form of distance from the people who mattered most. As his fame grew, his home life fell apart. His first marriage to Andrea Bertorli had ended in heartbreak, and though they shared 2 children, Simon and Jolie, Collins often wasn't around to see them grow. Touring schedules kept him away for months at a time. The tabloids mocked him as a workaholic, obsessed with proving himself rather than being a father. His second marriage, to Jill Tavelman, seemed like a chance to start over. They had a daughter, Lily, and Collins dreamed of being the present father he hadn't been before. But fame had its own rhythm, and it rarely slowed down for family life. Once again, the stage lights pulled him away from home, and before long, that marriage collapsed too. By the mid-1990s, Collins had begun to carry the weight of regret. He loved his children more than anything, but they often saw him through headlines, photographs, and the rare quiet moments between tours. And so, when he was asked to write songs for Disney's Tarzan, Collins carried more than just a professional assignment into the studio. He carried guilt, longing, and a desperate wish to say something he couldn't bring himself to tell his children in person. What words could possibly make up for lost time? What melody could bridge the gap between father and daughter? Collins thought he had the answer. It started, as many songs do, in the quiet of a piano room. Collins sat down to work on material for Tarzan. At first, he thought of the story itself, a baby raised by a mother who wasn't his own, love that transcended blood, and the promise of protection in a world full of danger. But as he played, his mind wandered. He wasn't just writing for a film. He was writing for Lily. His daughter was only a child then, but Collins felt the distance between them growing with every year. He knew she would grow up seeing him less as dad and more as Phil Collins, the rock star. That thought broke him. So he wrote, "You'll Be in My Heart." The lyrics came like a whisper from a parent to a child, a simple, unconditional vow of love. You'll be in my heart, always.
Be here in my heart, always.
For the audience, it was a Disney anthem. For Collins, it was a promise to his daughter that no matter how many miles or headlines separated them, she would always have a place in him. Disney loved the song. They used it as the film's emotional centerpiece, and it went on to win Collins an Academy Award. To the public, it was another triumph for a man who already had everything. But privately, Collins confessed later, the song wasn't about Hollywood at all. It was about his guilt, his longing, and his fragile hope to keep a bond alive with his little girl. And the weight of that truth was so heavy, it brought him to tears. By the time Phil Collins was 47, You'll Be in My Heart had become one of his most beloved songs.
Just take my hand, hold it tight.
It played on radios around the world, won him critical acclaim, and introduced his music to a whole new generation of fans. On the surface, it was another glittering jewel in his crown. But in interviews, Collins began to reveal the deeper story. He admitted that every time he sang it, he cried. Because behind the melody was the face of his daughter. Behind the applause was the silence of the nights he had missed at home. Fans were stunned. Many had assumed Collins' most emotional songs came from his divorces, the bitterness of In the Air Tonight,
So you can wipe off that grin, 'cause I know where you've been.
the heartbreak of Against All Odds.
Take a look at me now.
Few knew that a simple lullaby carried more pain for him than any breakup ballad. Collins explained that You'll Be in My Heart wasn't just written for a film, it was a message he could never stop repeating to Lily. And yet, saying it in song only reminded him of all the times he hadn't been there to say it in person. For some it was the first glimpse of the man behind the superstar, vulnerable, broken, and willing to admit it. For others it raised a painful question: could a song really heal what years of absence had broken? That question haunted Collins as much as it fascinated his fans. Because even though he confessed, the guilt never truly left him. And as Lily grew older, the world would see for itself how this hidden pain shaped both their lives. As Lily Collins grew older, she began to see the distance between herself and her father more clearly. Unlike the children of other classmates, her dad was rarely there for ordinary moments. The school plays, the daily routines, the quiet dinners at home. Instead, she saw him on magazine covers, in music videos, and on award shows. Lily has spoken openly about this in later years. In her memoir, Unfiltered, she described the pain of growing up with a father who, though loving, was often absent. She wrote letters to him, raw, honest reflections on what it felt like to grow up in the shadow of fame while craving a father's presence. For Phil, those words cut deeply. He had written, "You'll be in my heart," as a vow to his daughter, but Lily revealed the other side of the story, that no song, however heartfelt, could fully replace time lost. And yet there was no bitterness in her words, only honesty. She admitted she loved her father, that she cherished the bond they still shared, but she couldn't ignore the cracks that fame had carved between them. For fans, this revelation made Collins' confession all the more powerful. When he said the song made him cry, it wasn't just artistic emotion. It was the pain of a father realizing that his daughter felt the absence he had always feared. The world saw Tarzan as a Disney fantasy, but for Collins and Lily, You'll Be in My Heart was a mirror, reflecting both love and loss. And soon, Collins himself would reveal just how much that mirror haunted him. From the outside, Phil Collins' life seemed perfect. He was one of the few artists to dominate both the 1980s and the 1990s. He had sold out tours, Grammys, and even an Oscar. Critics called him a genius, a man who could make both pounding rock anthems and tender ballads. But behind the curtain, Collins lived a double life. One life was spent under blinding stage lights, commanding tens of thousands of fans. The other was spent quietly at home, trying to make up for lost time with his children. Collins later admitted that the guilt never left him. Even when he was smiling on stage, the thought of his children being without him gnawed at his heart. That's why You'll Be in My Heart was so different from the rest of his catalog.
Stay on now and forever.
It wasn't written for fame or money, it was written to soothe the ache of regret. In one interview, Collins described writing the song as a moment of clarity. He realized that while he couldn't undo the past, he could at least put into music what he couldn't always say aloud. You'll be in my heart, he repeated, not just to Lily, but to himself. It was a reminder that even if he wasn't physically present, his love remained. Yet the more he sang it, the heavier it felt. Each performance was a reminder not only of his love, but of his absence. And so, the song became both his greatest comfort and his sharpest pain. The question lingered, could music really carry enough weight to heal wounds left by years of separation? To the public, You'll Be in My Heart was a Disney classic. It played during emotional moments of Tarzan, resonating with parents and children everywhere. It won the Academy Award for Best Original Song in 2000, cementing Collins' reputation as one of the great pop craftsmen of his time. Audiences sang along joyfully, thinking of it as a sweet lullaby about family love, but they had no idea that for Collins, it was something far more personal. In interviews, when Collins admitted that the song made him cry, fans were taken aback. Many had assumed his emotional legacy was tied to heartbreak songs like Against All Odds, or the raw power of In the Air Tonight. But You'll Be in My Heart, that was supposed to be the happy song. This contrast created a fascinating divide. For millions of fans, the track was a hopeful anthem about belonging. For Phil Collins, it was a reminder of absence, of guilt, and of a love he struggled to express in everyday life. And the truth was, he didn't always want to sing it. Some nights, Collins admitted, the emotions were too raw. The tears threatened to overwhelm him. But as a professional, he carried on. He gave the audience what they came for, while silently wrestling with the very meaning of the lyrics. It was this duality, the world's joyful lullaby versus the father's confession, that made the song one of the most complicated pieces in Collins' career. And as time went on, the story only grew more layered, especially as Lily began to speak for herself. The moment came when Phil Collins, then 47, finally admitted what many fans had never suspected. In an interview, he confessed that You'll Be in My Heart made him cry every time he thought of it. For audiences, this was shocking. Collins, the man who had stood unshaken before millions, breaking down over a Disney song. But for him, it was never just a Disney song. It was a father's prayer. It was the love letter he couldn't always deliver in person. He explained that the lyrics were not written for the film alone, but for Lily. They were words he wanted her to carry for life, even when he wasn't there. You'll be in my heart, always. Simple, powerful, heartbreak. On stage, Collins often kept his composure, but backstage, away from the spotlight, he admitted that the emotion sometimes overwhelmed him. It wasn't the roar of the crowd that echoed in his mind. It was the silence of the empty chairs at school plays, the birthdays he had missed, the memories he hadn't shared. The world heard a lullaby. Phil Collins heard a reminder. And that's why, when he sang it, the tears came. Not as a performance, not as a show, but as a confession. A confession that even a superstar, with all the fame and fortune in the world, couldn't escape the ache of being a father who wished he had been there more. For Collins, You'll Be in My Heart was both salvation and punishment. It gave him a way to say what he couldn't speak, but it also forced him to relive the guilt of missed years. It was a paradox he carried for the rest of his life. Over time, You'll Be in My Heart became more than a Disney song. It became one of Collins's most enduring pieces, beloved by parents and children alike. Countless families played it at weddings, christenings, and even funerals. It spoke to the timeless bond between loved ones. But for Phil Collins and Lily, it was more than timeless. It was personal. Lily, who went on to become a successful actress, later reflected on her complicated relationship with her father. In her memoir, she wrote about the pain of absence, but also about the healing process. She acknowledged the love her father carried, even if it was expressed more through songs than through presence. For fans, this gave Collins' confession new weight. The song wasn't just a hit, it was proof that music could carry feelings too big for conversation, too painful for direct words. And while Collins could never rewrite the past, he left behind a message for his daughter and unknowingly for the millions who listened. Every time the song plays, it's not just the story of Tarzan, it's the story of a father's love, wrapped in melody, carrying both joy and regret. At 47, Phil Collins confessed what the world didn't expect, that even legends cry, that even global icons feel the same ache of guilt and longing as anyone else. And maybe that's why the song endures. Because it doesn't just belong to Phil and Lily, it belongs to anyone who has ever loved, lost, or tried to hold on across distance. And so, the next time you hear You'll Be in My Heart, remember this: behind the Disney magic lies a father's confession. behind the applause lies a man who admitted that no amount of fame could replace time with his child. Phil Collins didn't just write a song, he poured his heart into a melody, and in doing so, he gave us all a glimpse of his most vulnerable truth. What do you think? Can music truly heal the wounds of absence? Or are some confessions too late to change the past? Tell us your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want more stories like this, the hidden truths behind the voices that shaped your life, make sure to subscribe to RetroWaves, because the music never fades, and neither do the stories.